Hello, welcome to this lesson of Mastering 5th Grade Math. Here we're going to tackle the topic of thinking about fractions in terms of division. And I'm not talking about dividing fractions by other fractions. I'm talking about when you look at a fraction on a piece of paper, I want you to start thinking in the back of your mind that that fraction, everything we said up to this point is true with what a fraction represents. But you can also think about a fraction as a division of the numerator divided by the denominator. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If we have the improper fraction, we've been talking about before about improper fractions. If I have the improper fraction 10 halves like this, what this means is that the numerator is larger than the denominator. And whenever you look at fractions from here on out, everything that we've set up until now is absolutely true with what fractions represent. But you can also think about this fraction meaning 10 divided by 2. So you can carry this around in a calculation all day long. 10 halves is perfectly fine to bring around in any math problem that you have. But if you want to simplify it further, you can just look at this as division. 10 divided by 2. It almost looks like what you would think of as basic division problem, 10 divided by 2. So 10 halves is 10 divided by 2, which of course is 5. So what this is saying is that 10 halves, the fraction 10 halves, is exactly the same as the number 5. You need to start thinking about fractions representing that fraction bar is almost like a division symbol. All right, let me do another one and then I will wrap it up and show you kind of how it ties into everything we learned before. What if you have 12 sixths, right? So, of course, this is a fraction. It's improper because the numerator is bigger than the denominator, but you can start thinking about this as division. 12 divided by 6, of course, it goes evenly, and that is 2, right? Of course, you could do another one. You could say 15 thirds. Well, of course, this looks like 15 divided by 3, and of course, it divides evenly, and you get 5 because 3 times 5 gives you 15. So you see what I'm saying? When you see an improper fraction that evenly divides like this, then if you want to simplify it, you can just do the division and write the whole number down. Now, let me tie this in to what we've learned previously and show you that everything is the same as it was before. Let's look at this improper fraction. What about 13 halves? What I'm telling you is that this is an improper fraction, just like this is an improper fraction, just like this is an improper fraction, because the numerator is bigger than the denominator. And I'm again telling you that you can view this as a division. You can view this as 13 halves, no problem. You can convert it to a mixed fraction as well. But you can see that there's no way that you can take 13 and divide it by 2 and get a whole number. So because of that, because this doesn't divide evenly, typically we leave the improper fraction alone, or we can convert it to a mixed fraction, which we've already learned how to do. So it still looks like division, it's just that it doesn't divide evenly here. What about the fraction 17 ninths? This is an improper fraction, but 9 does not go into 17 an even number of times, so I can leave it as an improper fraction in my calculations, or I can convert it to a mixed fraction. We've done that before. But in any case, we can't do a division like these problems because of the fact that it doesn't divide evenly. What about 18 ninths? Well, again, this looks like division, 18 divided by 9. This does go evenly, so I can rewrite that one as 2. All right, so basically, anytime you have an improper fraction with a bigger number on top than the bottom, and you're trying to simplify it, try to just divide it. Try to treat it as a division symbol, and if it does divide evenly like these problems, then you just write the whole number down because a fraction really is division. But if you have an improper fraction like this one or this one where it doesn't divide evenly, then the only thing you can do is just leave it as an improper fraction. Or if you want to, you can convert it to a mixed fraction. You know, for instance, for this one, for 13 halves, we've already done this in previous lessons, but to convert this to an improper fraction, you do the division, right? So you say 13 divided by 2, it goes 6 times, 6 whole times. 6 times 2 is 12, so the difference between 13 and 12 gives you a remainder 1, so you put the remainder up there and then you stick it over the denominator that you have. So this represents 6.5. This is how we converted it to mixed fractions. So it's the same process. In here, it's just that when you do the division, you get a whole number. Over here, when you do the division, you get a whole number, and so on. And the last thing I want to show you, or just tell you, I guess, quickly, is that all of the fractions we've studied, even the regular fractions, not the impropers, but the regular fractions, they all represent division as well. You know, when we talk about 1/2, we said before that this is part over whole, right? When we had 3/4, we said this is part over whole. Or if you chop a pizza into 4 pieces and you take 3 of those pieces, that's what 3/4 is. Or 7/8. All of these fractions and many, many others are regular fractions where the numerator is smaller than the denominator. Those are regular fractions, those are not improper. But in all of these fractions, they still represent division. What you really are doing is you're saying, you can think of it as part over whole, that's fine. But really what you have here is 3 divided by 4. Really what you have here is 1 divided by 2. Really what you have here is 7 divided by 8. But in those cases, you really can't take 1 and divide by 2 and get an even, a whole number as a result. You can't take 3 and divide by 4 and get a whole number. You can't take 7 and divide by 8 and get a whole number. So because of that, we just leave the fraction like it's written here because it represents something less than 1. When you take 3 and divide by 4, it's representing 3 parts out of 4, and so it's a number less than 1. So I guess what I'm trying to say in this entire lesson is that all up until now we've learned what fractions are, we've learned about numerators and denominators, we've learned about mixed fractions and how to convert between mixed and improper, and later on we'll learn how to add and subtract and multiply fractions and things like that. But I don't want you to forget that in this whole entire discussion of fractions, that every fraction on the board, every single one of them really represents division. It's basically saying numerator divided by denominator. It's just in this case we can't do the division because it's number less than 1. We cannot do this division and get a whole answer. So we leave the fraction written in these cases as a fraction. But in any case on the board where we can do that division, like this one, or like this one, or like this one, then you can simplify that fraction just simply by doing the division. That's basically all we're trying to say. So anytime you can divide the numerator, take it and divide by the denominator and get a whole number, that's a perfectly good way to simplify that fraction. So make sure you understand this is a very simple concept, but something that some students can overlook because we get deep into the fraction business, and sometimes when you start looking at denominators and numerators, you kind of forget that the basic idea of a fraction, it does represent part over whole, but you can also think of it as division. So make sure you understand that.